Welcome to the Superintendent's Hangout, where we discuss topics in education, charter schools, life in general, and not necessarily in that order. I'm your host, Dr. Sharetta. Come on in and hang out. This episode is brought to you by McGriff Insurance Services and Senior Vice President Mike Lutosky. For over a century, McGriff has focused on building long-term relationships to deliver innovative insurance solutions. The McGriff name dates back to 1886 and the founding of McGriff, Sables, and Williams. Today, McGriff is part of Truist Insurance Holdings, Inc., one of the top 10 largest insurance brokers in the world. McGriff provides highly consultative risk management and insurance solutions for businesses of all sizes, as well as for personal insurance needs. Coverages available include commercial property and casualty, small business, employee benefits, management liability, personal lines, and much more. Mike Lutosky's expertise is wide-ranging and includes transitioning employers from fully insured to partially self-funded medical, dental, and vision programs, HRA wrap programs, reference-based pricing, healthcare pricing transparency, pharmacy consulting, wellness programs, marketing, implementation, and ongoing management of fully insured benefit plans, and much more. Mike can be reached on his cell phone at 619-925-1731. All proceeds from this sponsorship support the Eric C. Mitchell Scholarship Fund at Albert Einstein Academies. The scholarship benefits graduates who exemplify the outstanding human qualities that define Mr. Mitchell's legacy. For this episode, I sat down with Ray Rodriguez. Ray is a retired educator with decades of experience both as a teacher, an administrator at the site level, as well as the district level, all around the state of California. But don't just think that because Ray is retired, he's sitting at home, relaxing, and not doing anything. Ray, as he describes, has always been attracted by that, quote, shiny object. And so, as you might imagine, he's involved in Baja, California off-road racing. He's involved in woodworking. He's been a licensed general contractor for decades, and much, much more. Ray shares his views on everything from the long process that a school district has to go through in order to build a school that is worthy of students, to education in general, to life advice about financial planning and pursuing your passion in life, and his motto of just do it. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did making it. Welcome, Ray. Thank you for joining us on the Superintendent's Hangout today. I thought we could start out by having you tell us about yourself, what your origin story is, where you come from, what you're doing now in your life, and anything in between that you want to hit on.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to come here and spend a little bit of time with you, one-on-one, without a crowd of people being around us. I'm one of those people that comes from a familiar background. All my parents were educators. My grandparents were educators. My grandmother was a principal at a parochial school back in Kansas City. So I come from a long line of educators. My father was a teacher and administrator with the Los Angeles School District, as was my mother. And in fact, Mom started out as a home economics teacher way back when in the 60s and worked her way up to principal and a director of curriculum and instruction for the Sweetwater Unified School District before she took a job with the United Nations as their director of the United Nations International School. So I come from a long line of educators, and there was nothing else that I wanted to be when I graduated from school than a teacher. I mean, so that was my first major career, was as a teacher right out of college. Went to San Diego State, graduated there in the middle 70s.
Back before they had a good basketball team.
Back before we had a good anything. Don Corey, we just came off some good years with Don Coryell and the football team.
Football, that's right.
And
West Coast offense or whatever,
that's right. And in fact, it's kind of funny because every time we're season ticket holders for the basketball team, and every time we go to Viejas Arena, we walk by the skeletal remains of the Aztec Bowl, which is where I graduated, right there in that bowl. So it's really kind of exciting for my family and kids when we go by there and take a look at that. But yeah, no, we had a good time. As I graduated from school, we were living up in Los Angeles in my early years. That's where I kind of grew up. And my parents, unfortunately, got divorced, and my mother moved down to San Diego. And I went to Point Loma High School. That's where I graduated from. And so, I've got a long history here in San Diego from Point Loma, and then wandered off to a series of colleges and universities where I could finally find myself. Started out at UC San Diego and then went on to Pepperdine University and finished up at San Diego State. But that's where I got my BA and my master's that ultimately came from Point Loma Nazarene College here in San Diego also. So, education's kind of in my blood. It's what I did. But, I have a second career. The second life of Ray Rodriguez was that throughout the course of that thing, my father always told me, he said, son, have two careers. He says, because you never know when you're going to get tired of what you're doing. And you need to have something to fall back on for you and your family. And there was always something in the background that I had that really interested me, and that was working in construction. I mean, all through college, during the summers and time off, and even when I was a teacher, the summertime, teachers don't get paid during the summer, so
right.
we had that time to go do something. So I started a construction company, and we used to do home remodels and smaller projects that we could accomplish during the summer. And I recruited other teachers, and we would go out and keep busy during the summer. So I always had that in the background, and when I finally was able to look at my education career and realize that it's not going much further. And I had spent 26 years working as a teacher and public school administrator, deputy superintendent, and in a number of districts. I got recruited by an engineering company to go help them do some school construction projects. So that's kind of how I got my foray into facilities and facilities management. Although I had been the director of facilities for Sacramento City Schools and for Long Beach Community College District. So there was, I had a pretty easy transition. A lot of people ask me, well, how did you get, all that experience? And I said, well, if you look at my resume, it looks like I can't hold a job because there's so many different positions that I've held. And what it really is that I really am a shiny object kind of guy. I see things that interest me, and I want to go delve further into them and see what's under the cover, so to speak. So I'm not afraid to try something new and different. And so that's kind of my nature and the way that I have progressed over the years.
I think I recall you talking about the fact that your mother earned a doctorate, correct? And that was kind of early days for women earning doctorates.
Well, it's in our blood. Like I told you earlier, my grandmother was a principal at a parochial school in Kansas City, and that was highly unusual for a Mexican during that era. And we're talking, the 40s, 30s.
Right, Great Depression era, right?
To be an educated person, to go to college. She was, sent to a college by her local church. They saw something in her, and they sent her to Kansas City to go to school, and ultimately become the director of an elementary school out there. I mean, that was very unusual. And so she instilled that in my mother. My mother was, I like to think of my mother as a frustrated artist. She was an incredible artist, award-winning artist and author, but she was a driven woman who really was a high achiever. So she had gone through all these positions and decided that she needed to have a doctorate to round out her degree. And she was the first graduate of a joint program between Claremont College and San Diego State, and got a dual doctorate from San Diego State and from Claremont Men's College. So she, you know, that was her. She wanted to do that because she knew that she could achieve that, and she did. My father started his PhD program at Yale University, and although he never completed it, he decided to return early because for some reason he just got dissatisfied with it, but came back, and he was an assistant superintendent with LA Unified for a number of years. He spent 44 years with LA Unified, wow, actually. And so that's, it was like, growing up with educators was the conversation around the dinner table, so to speak, was always about what are you doing to help kids? And in fact, my father and I always had a conversation. He always closed with that, "Now go help kids." That was kind of the mantra in our family. So it was interesting. My father was always focused on his work. He was a very strong community activist. He worked for a number of community action groups when he was younger, before he got into teaching, and so he was deeply involved in activities to promote education and instruction among the Hispanic youth, mostly in East Los Angeles. He and my mother were both very active in the student movements of the '60s, back in '68 and stuff, and were very close to the students that were organizing the Hispanic brownouts, the walkouts in East LA. A number of those people formed a very tight-knit community. And when I started my teaching career, my first full-time job, was at Lincoln High School in LA. It was the center of the student walkout movement. And a lot of people that were involved then were now teachers, and they were in those same schools. So it was really fascinating to meet, living history and that sort of thing.
So you've really, in your lifetime, and certainly your parents in their lifetime, saw LA evolve and in some ways devolve and change.
It was a totally different lens. And, as a young student, a young kid back then growing up, we grew up, our house was like in the shadows of Cal State LA. And so there was always people coming in and out of our house that were, in my day, they were, people that I would read about in the newspaper. They would come by the house. And it was all walks of life. And it was not only Hispanic people, but, a lot of African Americans. My father was a teacher at Roosevelt High School in Los Angeles. He used to teach woodshop of all things. And, but it would not be unusual for him to bring home a group of students, to either hang out or work on around the house and stuff. And during those days, one guy that used to come over every now and then was Mike Garrett, who became the director of athletics, an outstanding football player for USC. I mean, so people would drop by that would become later on in life become something pretty important. So it was a fun time, and it was interesting times back then.
So I'd imagine you picked up some of your woodworking abilities and your affinity for construction, probably partially from your dad, right? With wood shop and that sort of thing.
Well, my father was, I picked up a lot of my woodworking skills from my dad, but my grandfather was also a cabinet maker on my mother's side. He was a cabinet maker and a journeyman cabinet maker. And one of the things that I really cherish is I have his union membership card, his gold union membership card from the Carpenters Union. So, there's a lot of heritage back there, and it was just something that we did. A lot of family members later on in life became carpenters or mill workers, and that sort of thing.
And you're still doing woodworking today, right? As a hobby / business, right? I mean,
when I retired from full-time work in 2018, I got kind of bored sitting around the house, and so I decided that I needed to have a hobby to do something. Yeah. And so I fell back on what I knew how to do, and that was that was carpentry, and I set up a wood shop we have a pretty large garage, and I set up a wood shop there just to keep busy and do some things. Well, one thing led to the next, and pretty soon I was making cutting boards, and one or two at a time, and then 10 or 20 at a time, and pretty soon it became a business. So recently, actually, I just closed that business down and sold off the equipment, and I'm moving in a different direction. But I have fun.
Yeah.
One of my favorite mantras is that if you're not having fun doing what you're doing, you need to be doing something else. So it kind of rejuvenates one's soul and keeps them going in a positive direction. I mean, I do that because I like to show my kids and other people that come around, because there's always people coming over the house, that there's many other facets in life. You don't need to be stuck in a rut or open your eyes and look around. A very good friend of mine, gave me the notion. He says, everybody says that opportunity is just around the corner, but if you don't look, you might not notice it.
Yeah, so in a minute we'll return to the facilities piece because I want to talk about that, but I want to make sure I touch on Baja 1000, off-road racing, and the reason for listeners, the reason this comes up is I didn't even know this about you when we first started working together on some facilities committees, and then one day you said, I can do a call next week, but I'm gone for a few days to Baja, and I thought it was vacation, and it turns out, I don't know, you were sleeping in a truck or something. So if you could tell us about that business.
Well, I've always been an off-road enthusiast. When I was young, I have an older brother, and my father bought both of us motorcycles back in the early 60s. And we used to tool around the local canyons and stuff on our motorcycles, so we always were involved in that. And we grew up next door to a guy that was a professional racer. He owned a construction business, but he, on weekends, used to go out to the desert and race, and he would take us along with him, just because we were local kids, and so we really got enamored by that whole thing and really liked it. Plus, it fit my whole mantra. I love mechanical things. I love the outdoors and camping out in the desert and that sort of stuff. So really got hooked on that, and we started racing ourselves. And in 1984, I was able to put together a small race team. We raced in what's known as the San Felipe 250, and it's a race that actually just recently finished last weekend, this year's version of it. But we raced a Volkswagen Baja Bug in that race, and had a great time. Didn't finish, broke down, but nonetheless, just the camaraderie and all the whole thing that related to that. Well, after that, I kind of got away from it. Life came forward. You got married,
Family,
you got a family,
yeah.
You've got work to do, and so we set it aside for a while. Then in 2006, my brother and I were sitting around thinking, we'd really like to go back to Baja. And so we joined an organization called Mag 7, which is an off-road pit crew service. And they provide contract pit crews for those drivers that don't have their own or don't have the ability to recruit the people. Because it takes a lot of logistics to get a vehicle from point A to point B down at Baja. So we joined that, and we started working in the pits, so to speak, and running those sort of things. And ultimately, I became a member of the board of directors of that organization. For the next 10 years, I sat on their board of directors and helped run that organization. In fact, I just recently retired from that position too. So it was a way to keep involved with the off-road racing scene without having to do a lot of the heavy lifting, so to speak. But we still enjoy it. And in fact, just before coming over here today, I was busy rebuilding a motor for my off-road vehicle that we race down there. And we're in the process of forming another race team. My brother and his wife decided they want to go and race in a couple of races next year. So we purchased another race vehicle, and we're building that up to go race in a few races next year.
So the Baja 1000 is almost a round-the-clock race, correct? I mean,
it is it's always a 30-hour race, I think. You have 30 hours to complete, but it comes up November first couple weeks in November. But yeah, it's
north to south, and then south to north. Do they alternate, or
no. It's every other year or a couple of years they run what's known as there's a loop race, and then there's a peninsula run.
Okay.
So most years it's a loop race. It starts and ends in Ensenada.
Okay.
And it runs 500 miles or 1,000 miles.
And come back, yeah.
Yeah, and come back. And then every few years it goes all the way down to La Paz. And it's not 1,000. It was originally 1,000 kilometers.
Okay.
But it's usually a lot longer than that. And so, and it's the craziest race you ever wanted to get involved with. It's 100 miles an hour. It's 20 miles an hour. It's dirt. It's cactus. It's dust. It's water. It's everything you can imagine gets thrown at you in that race. It's bright, sunny. It's so hot, and then it's freezing cold at night. And yeah, it's an amazing race.
How do they mark the course? I mean, I'm just naive. All I see is video, and I see these motorcycles flying off what look like cliffs, and
it's kind of tough to conceive for people that aren't involved.
Yeah.
But there's course markings that are set out by a team in advance, and there's GPS tracking that was given to the participants ahead of time, so they can put it in their GPS
kind of go
system.
point to point.
Yeah, and it's they've got a tracking device in their vehicles that has the race map in it, and pretty much all the vehicles have a navigator who's looking at the map and telling the driver which way to turn and go, and which is the danger coming up, and because they all pre-run the course before the race, so they've been up and down that course a few times before the race, so they've got the best lines that they can follow to get down there, and it's a very sophisticated race. I mean, it's not just somebody jumping in a car racing down there, because you'd be dead.
Right. Well, I've driven from San Diego to Loreto, which is I don't know how many hours north of Cabo. It's pretty far down the peninsula. I mean, we just went on the highway.
Yeah.
And even that was harrowing.
Try and do that in the dirt.
And it's winding, and you're not,
Yeah.
So it's
after a while, and many of these people have years of experience driving down there, so they're not unfamiliar with the territory, and so they know where they're going. They have a sense of where they're headed, and it's just really a challenge to see if you can get through this year's course, because they change the course every year.
So they can't really even have an official course record, right? Because if the course is different every time.
That's right. I mean, they have records for the mileage and time, but that doesn't really apply to the next race because it's not the same course.
And then it doesn't rain a lot in Baja, but when it does, things get washed out too, I'd imagine.
Or snows. A few years back.
Oh, that's right. You hit, because it goes, do you hit altitude in some parts? Because I know the middle of the peninsula gets high.
The north part of Baja is up in the mountains.
Yeah.
And it snows and stuff up there. And I think it was 2006. We had snowfall in the valley of the Trinidad. And that was, they hadn't snowed there in 30 years, and here was this blanket of snow. And then, I've been in races where it snowed to get down to where we were going to be, and when we got there, it was raining. And then, some miserable conditions. I think I have a picture on my wall back in my office where we're standing next to our pit and bundled up because it's been raining all night.
So your brother is going to actually drive? Or is he
going to
support a
drive? We're putting together an all-women team. And so his wife is going to drive, and
wow.
And so he owns the team.
I'm not trying to guess ages, but
they're mid-50s.
It seems because it seems like a young person's game, but I guess maybe they're driving slowly, or
they're pretty powerful machines.
Wow, that's quite a
pretty powerful machines.
Quite a feat. The motorcycles, the bikes are probably. That's pretty demanding, right?
The bikes are very physical because you're muscling that thing around, and but with age comes a cage, and you kind of slow down.
That's a good T-shirt thing right there. age is, I guess if you roll it, you can get back up, right?
Yeah, but motorcycles are still the backbone of this industry, but the trucks and other vehicles have a lot more appeal to the television audience, and that's where a lot of the sponsorship and stuff comes in. So
that's interesting.
I mean, there's not a lot of rewards or
prize money or anything.
Prize money in this business, but most of it comes from sponsors and products and the money to put your team together.
You got to be willing to sink some money into it with not much return, but a lot of fun, right?
Yeah, and that's the big part we're doing right now is putting together sponsorship programs and stuff for this team. So that takes a bit.
Yeah, very interesting. So returning to the school facilities work, I met you through that, and you were finishing up your career at San Diego Unified School District and the work with the Charter School Facilities Committee. And for listeners on some previous podcasts, we talked about the extensive bond projects that San Diego Unified is pretty unique in the country in sharing proceeds with charter schools. And so that's how you and I got to know each other in our work. And then after you retired, you joined us in supporting us in our facilities work. Can you talk to us about your role in schools, and in particular charter schools, being able to obtain the type of facilities that our students deserve?
Back in 1989, early 2000, I was working for an engineering firm, and I was hired to help them get their school construction program going. And what they were doing was marketing school construction management services, and literally across the country and in different areas from Japan to we were in Puerto Rico and all over the United States. And when I got finished with that program, I decided to start my own business and formed a company that specialized in providing school construction management services. We rapidly got squeezed out of the public school market by the much larger firms. And a friend of mine, a lady that I work with pretty regularly now, named Joanne Copeland, urged me to look at the charter school market. And because there was a lot of charter schools that were being ignored by the larger school districts, yet they had facilities needs just like anybody else. And they were in substandard rented facilities that churches or shopping centers that needed a lot of work. So together with her, we started proposing to a number of projects, and ultimately we did like 30 some odd projects together, back up in Los Angeles and throughout the state of California, actually. Well, I had gone down to San Diego a number of times and to talk to the powers that be in San Diego about providing the same kinds of services down here, but unfortunately the bigger firms were already here and they didn't have a particular desire to bring on a smaller firm like mine. So I said okay, and went on my way, and ultimately had retired from the business there for the first time I retired. And I was sitting on a beach in Nazaré, Portugal, watching the waves and the surfers come in. And I get a phone call from the chief of facilities in San Diego and said, "You've been hired." I said, "Hired for what?" He says, "To head up our charter school program." And so I came back to San Diego and talked to the chief and to find out a little bit more about what they had going on. And it turned out that I was the only person that they felt that knew enough about charter school construction to head up this program. And so for the next 6 years, I was in charge of coordinating the projects and construction for San Diego Unified on their Prop C charter school program. And we were very successful. We executed some 24 different projects. I myself was responsible for the construction of 6 new charter schools, which we completed 2 in my tenure that I was there, and the other 4 were completed shortly thereafter. But more than that, to continue that legacy, I was very familiar with the state school construction program. And so having worked with them in my previous assignments with Sacramento City Schools and with LA Unified, I was able to put together applications and programs for another $66 million of state funding, which was totally left. Nobody would have gone out after that had we not pushed it and moved it forward and able to get those applications in. We were successful, and the state awarded us, $66 million in that program. So that added to the original $350 million program, and so we were able to extend the life of that program quite a bit more. And then subsequent to that, we were able to put together a program for the next bond measure, which was, the Prop YY.
Measure YY.
Measure YY, which was $550 million of funding, and possibly another round of state funding for those schools that were not able to apply last time. So we were able to broaden the funding available for charter schools. And I think if you look back at what is my best, strongest accomplishment, was able to do so much work for charter schools in one school district. I mean, LA Unified had a lot of charter schools, and we worked on a lot of those, but they were very small projects. Nothing to the magnitude of what we did here in San Diego. That was, probably the biggest thing I look back on. Now, I've worked on a number of projects, from UC Merced to building police and fire stations and athletic arenas, but nothing has been compares to what we did in San Diego. I mean, that was just a phenomenal feat. And all it was really just a matter of following the process and procedures that is laid out. I mean, I always felt that if you follow a proven process and procedure, you're going to get a predictable result. And so if you just follow what's laid out there for you, and you can reap the benefits and rewards of that. And that's exactly what we did. We had some very good people working with us that were strongly committed to the charter school program. But on the other hand, the complexities of this program really were challenging, because there's almost a passive resistance by a number of departments and facilities to not change the way we do things. And charter schools was a definite change, in the priorities and the allocation of resources and the amount of time that it takes. Even the amount of time that you've put in the committee, that's a lot.
10 years.
Yeah, 10 years. And, 4 or 5 hours every meeting. Yeah. I mean, that kind of commitment is something that it was a paradigm shift for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think people most likely don't really think about the process that an entity has to go through to build a school building, right? We see developers put up condos, and Shea Homes will put up massive communities, and it seems to spring up like a mushroom overnight. But the guidelines and requirements and restrictions and different jurisdictions that come into play even when a school district is doing a project, then layer the fact that an entity is a charter school on top of that. I think there's not a lot of people out there who can really guide a project through from A to Z and bring it in on time and really understand how this works.
The school construction program after the earthquakes of 1971 is probably one of the most highly regulated businesses or programs there ever is, because student safety is number one. I mean, everything has to be built according to the codes in place
right.
at the time, and the codes change every few years, and so you've got to be updated on all of that sort of information. The procurement processes are different from every school district. No school district operates the same. I mean, San Diego Unified is vastly different from El Cajon Unified, and I mean, they're just, it's difficult. And you've got selected companies that are very good specialists at this, and they tend to keep the smaller construction firms out of the mix, yet some of those smaller ones are very good specialists. It's a very complicated and challenging program and process. And so if you don't know the ins and outs of it. You can get taken for a ride very quickly because of the complexity. So, one of the things that why I try and fit in, I have a basic philosophy that says that and I think it was Jerry Garcia that first said this. He said that it's not merely enough to be the best of the best, but rather to be the only one that does what you do. And being that my background as an educator, from a classroom teacher to a public school administrator, and a contractor. I've been a licensed building contractor since 1979. And
wow, you've seen a lot of regs change.
Yeah. And I mean, you have to keep up with a lot of that stuff to keep your license active, and my license is still active to this day. So I'm able to translate what's going on in the public policy and the regulations to how you can do things in the school site, and then layer that on with the traditional schools and the charter schools. Because as you know, charter schools can go in a number of directions. They can go under the state school building program with DSA, or they can go to the local jurisdiction and have the city inspect their school sites and stuff. So, you having built the school here, you went through one program.
I did. I still have scars.
Yeah, and now we're going to, with the high school, go through a different program. So there's differences between the two, and if you understand those rules and regulations, then you know how the game is played. You know where you can cut corners or gain advantage to that whole system. So I think that's the value of having somebody that can do that. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of people that can do that. There's not a lot of folks that will provide you with the information you need to know, because why? There's a lot of money involved. And, people go where they think they can get the best value.
Then you have situations where, and I don't know enough about this to know if it's a specifically California phenomena, but Melrose, or maybe that's just San Diego, but is that a state?
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. So then you have the interesting thing of where certain communities are paying an additional tax over 10, 20 years to build schools in their community. Yeah. And that's its own interesting combination, right? Where you've got developers coming in, and maybe that's one of the conditions to them being allowed to build in a certain area to be able to provide the school to handle that density.
There's all of these little techniques that cities and communities use to raise funds to build their programs. The Melrose bonds were one, because they needed a school there. Back in the early days, in probably the 70s and 80s, late 80s actually, and 90s, Melrose became very popular because communities were growing fast.
Right. And
they needed schools, yet school districts typically only started planning a school when they had 50% of the student population to fill the school in place. And so, it meant there was going to be a long time before the student population was big enough to warrant the full school construction project. And then the state's guidelines for school construction were really out of sync with modern development and the demographics that were going on. So we saw a number of cases where schools were planned and built, and the population peaked, and then it declined.
Right.
And so you had these schools, newer schools that were empty. And so, people start shifting the rules again, saying, well, you can't build until you've got, these people, and you got to pay for 50% of the funds to build the school. So there's all kinds of little shenanigans that went on. And that's the challenge of planning school facilities and building them. So you find out that we had a number of alternative kind of schools, and also the rise of the charter school movement and the magnet school movements, and all these other types of alternative programs came into being as a way to address inadequate school facilities, inadequate offering of curriculum, and just the fact that you can't keep teaching the same old thing over and over again in the same kinds of facilities, because we needed newer, modern facilities that could provide training and education in the types of facilities that they'd see in the workplace or in college, for that matter.
Where do you think we're going in the future? I mean, when you look at California, we have a net declining population in the state. I think probably exacerbated by COVID, maybe certainly by cost of living. Low interest rates didn't help with the cost of living. Of course, that has changed, but then inflation's not helping with the cost of living. Do you foresee a real slowdown in new school construction, let's say in the next quarter century?
I don't. I think there's a pent up demand, and the population shift. I think, and this is just my personal opinion, is going to continue no matter what, because there's only a select population that can move. Most population, I think, is stuck here.
Can't afford to,
they
right?
can't afford to move and relocate because their jobs are here, their families are here, their lifelines are here, and so there's select population that's always going to move, and those that are financially, and fiscally better able to relocate or have a job that'll allow them to work remotely, and we see a lot of that now coming back home. We saw a lot of vacancies, but now we're seeing those people returning back to the workplace. So I think this is a temporary shift in population. But we see that happening all the time, demographic shift. We still have, California is one of the largest employers in the country. We still have a tremendous agricultural economy here. We have a tremendous high-tech capacity here in San Diego. The neurosciences are huge here. So I think that we'll see changes in the kinds of populations we have. But basically, California is a big farm. You drive outside of the LA Basin, and it's just nothing but farms all the way to Sacramento and beyond, orchards from there. So, when you look at that, and I've traveled across this country and seen what's out there, and there's nothing like California. I don't care what anybody says. There's nothing that has the diversity that we have, that has the population, that has the jobs and the business centers that we have. So I think what we're seeing in terms of the increase and decrease in population is cyclical. I think it's going to happen, and we'll weather this like anything else.
You talked about one of the highlights, one of the successes of your career, which is really sounds like working with charter schools and helping to personally be involved with the opening of 6 new facilities and many more participating in them. What has been your greatest frustration with this whole industry of school construction?
My biggest frustration is the cost. I mean, we're looking at school construction projects that are not inexpensive. The price of raw materials has gone skyrocketed, and it has priced a number of projects out of existence. And the fact that many school districts have to rely on outside firms, contractors and stuff to provide these services is another incredible cost.
You mean management
firms?
Kind of the soft costs on a project.
Whereas if they had if school facilities funding had been better conceived and thought out of many years ago, and this is just looking back, we would not be in the hurry up and get these things built type of position that we're in. I mean, our facilities across the state are in desperate need of repair. And we've spent billions and billions of dollars building new schools and upgrading schools, but still there's a lot more work to do. It's kind of like repairing bridges and roads, Every year something's failing. And it might not be in San Diego Unified, but it could be in El Cajon, it could be in Chula Vista. And these other cities are going to have the same problems, but they can't pass a bond measure like city, San Diego can. And so it's that translated into being a huge need in California, not necessarily in one particular city, but the school construction needs are there. But to get those done, those cities don't have facilities departments that are on par with new construction. They have maintenance departments, and that that's good if they had the funding to maintain it. But the funding program, I mean, the way that schools are funded for maintenance and repair and construction, has always been a challenge. The state came in with the school funding program, schools facility program, but it helps to a degree, but it isn't the only answer. It isn't the complete answer for that matter. And it's highly reliant on the state passing school bond measures. So if a bond measure doesn't pass, then you got to wait another couple of years for another bond measure to come up. And, people...
Feast or famine.
Yeah. People get tired of having to pay so many bond measures. I mean, look at your tax bill and you're going to see line item after line item of school funding. And be it a K-12 school district, a college district.
It struck me when I started my teaching career in the early 90s that the first school I taught at, most of the classrooms were what they called temporary.
Yeah, portable.
And I drove past that same school this week, and they're still there. Yeah. And that's 30 years ago. So it makes you question what temporary or portable really means. I mean, I realize that we have the climate to be able to have what we call bungalow classrooms that open up to the open air rather than have a hallway. But is that a blessing and a curse? Has it delayed us in California having to actually just face the issue that we need to build some permanent buildings?
Well, yes and no. They call them relocatables now.
Yeah, it just depends on when you're going to relocate it, right?
Yeah.
They're euphemisms for the same damn thing. They're not.
They were bungalows, they were portables, now they're relocatables.
Relocatables.
But the fact that they are relocatable is you could move them to where the need is, should you come across that pot of gold and be able to build a new school. But you realize that it takes almost 6 years from conception to construction for a school program. That's typical.
Wait, say that again. So typically
from when you conceive the idea that you need a school and you start working on it.
As a district, for example.
Yeah, as a district, to the time you actually open that school, it could be 6 years. And that's just going through all the processes and procedures. I mean, from the designing of it, the bidding of it, contracting, the actual construction. Yeah. So it takes a long time. So those relocatable classrooms are needed until the duration. But then schools are notorious for filling empty space. So if you have a building that's sitting there, even though you don't have a class in there, it soon becomes a resource room or a parent center or something. But it's tough to get rid of them once you have them down there.
Well, it makes me smile because charter schools have Proposition 39, right? So right. In California, where that says that charter schools have access to comparable facilities for their students if the district is not using them. And so I can put in a bunch of mental air quotes around comparable and using, right? So as you say, it's pretty tough to delineate. I mean, if suddenly people asked you, hey, how many free rooms do you have in your house? Because if you have some free, some people are going to come in and live for low rent. Suddenly, no, that's my scrapbooking room, and I go in there this many times a day.
And the reality is they need that space.
Yeah.
The schools that I work on and that we've designed over the last few years are very creative, very innovative, have spaces for kids just to go and hang out, to unwind, to do their work. They're very forward-looking in terms of technology. We shrunk the library and pretty much put it online and created, although we have maintained them, there's a lot more information to be found on the internet than in the books. But we still need those books and we still need to have them available. I mean, so there's the schools that we're building nowadays are the latest and the greatest and technologically advanced buildings and classrooms we can provide. And the kids today they're different. They're not like you and I were when we were, growing up. They have different priorities, different interests, different motivation, for them. Athletics and activities are still there, but even those are getting high tech, and we're providing fitness facilities that are pretty much second to none nowadays, and even the arts departments. My background is, I graduated with a degree in history, but I have a second degree in television and film, and on that I also had a minor in art, and so the way that they teach art is more on the computer, digital. You've got, it's expanded into film, it's expanded into, different types of photography and different types of techniques. So all of these things we try and capture in the facilities that we're building nowadays for students, because we don't know where they're going to go with it. And in fact, the latest one, as we were discussing earlier, is culinary arts.
Right.
That you would think that that's an evolution of the home economics type of programs, but no, it's not. It's more of a hospitality kind of thing.
Right.
It's
Entrepreneurial,
and that's for me. I love that thing.
Right.
I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm creating businesses, I'm creating opportunities left and right, and that's always something that I like to see. You look at the explosion of restaurants and things in the places that we like to go, like in Baja or in Tijuana or in San Diego, and the abundance of high quality restaurants and smaller venues that are exploding throughout this whole region. They had to learn that somewhere.
And I think it gets to this question of innovation too and creativity, right? It's because I know we're designing our culinary aspect of our high school, and it's really important to me that it prepares students to be able to one day manage or possibly run their own restaurant, rather than just turn out kids who have learned low-level service sector jobs, being bussing tables, for example. There's nothing wrong with it, but kids don't need to go to school for that piece, right? And so I think that's really the balance and the focus. I know we talk about wood shop, we talk about auto shop. It used to be, we went through a period of time when no school board member would stand up there and say, hey, we need to have more auto shop and wood shop, because that was code for, hey, there's some kids who aren't going to go to college, and so I'm either racist or I'm classist or I have set low expectations.
Right.
But what's been most powerful for me is shifting that conversation around the career technical frame, which is, to work on cars nowadays, that's an exercise in computer programming.
It's something, and I work around automotive vehicles all my life, and even today, just trying to do a few simple things around some of the vehicles that we have. You always have to have a laptop plugged in.
Yep.
You've got to know what you're looking at, because you could mess things up really bad if you push the wrong button, and it's difficult. But I believe that you need to embrace entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
If a kid's got an interest in something, that needs to be followed up on. He needs to be able to go to the end of that thing and find out what it is. And that's my personal opinion. A lot of people wouldn't agree with me because they want to get focused on a track and go down this certain road. But I think that on-the-job training is great. I have done a lot of jobs I didn't want to do, but
yeah, me too.
I've learned something from them, and I've taken that to heart. And
I was just I flashed on something as you were saying that. When I was after my junior year in college, I was kind of at the age where I didn't want to go home for the summer, and I was in Maine, and so I was looking for a job, and the economy was bad. We're talking 1991. Economy bad. I couldn't even get a job. I applied to all these retail outlets, places. I don't know what I would possibly do there that would be productive, but I didn't get any of those jobs. And I saw a sign on the wall in the dorm, and it said, handyman wanted. And so I called the number, and got this very nice older woman on the line, and she was 1 year from retirement, and she was newly divorced, and she'd purchased an old farmhouse in Maine, and she needed help with, putting in a patio and just different things, and just like grunt work. I was in my 20s, and she could pay $2.50 an hour off the books. So it was either that or zero. And so I took the job, and I told my daughter this, and I tell young people this. I took the job, and about a month in, one day I'm up on the ladder and I'm sweating and there's hornets flying around. Everything was a muggy summer day. She goes, "Hey, I have a question for you." And I come down from the ladder and she says, "What are you going to do after college?" I said, "I don't know. I'm a history and political science major. I'm going to go to law school." And she said, "You know what? When you're done, come in the house, have a drink, and I got something for you." So I go in. She hands me this pamphlet. Turns out that it was a pamphlet for a fellowship to work and study abroad that she was on the board of. One thing led to another, and that has changed the rest of my life. I lived abroad for 1.5 years in Latin America. It's informed my career choice afterwards. I think there's, as you say, it's almost like if you don't look around the corner, you'll never know what opportunity is there.
That brings up another key point, is that education builds relationships. We all have certain mentors and people, even if we don't formalize that arrangement and agree. And those relationships have a lot of benefit down the road. I mean, there's people that had given me advice over the years that I follow to this day. And one guy advised me to get out of the school administrative end and get into school operations and school facilities. A guy named Mel Ross. He was the director of the School for the Deaf over in San Bernardino, and he was a friend of mine, and he and I had worked together on a project, and he was one of those guys that really encouraged me to move out of my comfort zone and get into something different, because he saw something in me that led him to believe that, and that led to me applying to Sacramento City Schools for their director of facilities up there, which I was ultimately selected, and spent about 5 years with Sac City Schools, and ultimately winding up being their chief operations officer. So it was, if you don't listen to people, you don't take their advice, take their, the information, you could be missing up on an opportunity. But if you haven't put yourself in a position to get that kind of information,
right?
You didn't take that job fixing up this lady's house, or if I hadn't taken the time to listen to this guy and hear him out, who knows where we would have been? We would have missed out on an opportunity for sure. We certainly could have survived, but there's another guy that when I started my construction management firm, there was a guy named Mike Koyman who just a fantastic person. He runs another construction management firm, but he advised me on how to surround myself with people that could deliver the goods, the people that I would want to employ, from financial accountants and people like that to people where I buy my insurance from and other things like that. But folks that work with businesses like mine, that can give you, upfront, straight on advice on how to run your business, how to manage your resources, and those types of things. That kind of information is invaluable for anybody that wants to get into business or do those, that type of stuff. So hanging around successful people breeds success.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I've been in conversations with some colleagues recently and encouraging them to get some financial planning advice. I don't think it's unique to the education field, but in general, people in the United States don't plan their finances.
No.
They kind of muddle along, and then one day they wake up and they're 43 years old, and they go on a website and project out and see how old they need to be before they retire, and then they get panicked and they go, "I got to work till I'm 72, and now I hate my job," and all this stuff. And so I'm actually going to have him on in a future podcast, is my own financial planner, Eric Sams. And one of the things that has been so inspiring for me in working with him is that he cuts through all of the misunderstanding and the fear around the fear that people have when they're starting this process of either setting up their own business or planning their finances. These are intimidating topics for people. And I mean, it's complicated. There's, when most of the Americans, when tax day comes around, they're sweating it out because they don't know if they're going to have to borrow money to pay their tax bill or whether they might get something back.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't know on the 14th. They don't find out till the 15th. Yeah. And the 16th is either a good day or a panic day. And part of that is due to just our lack of planning and foresight.
You're absolutely correct on that. I mean, the one thing that I did right when I first started my business is to put in place the processes and procedures to give me that predictable result. So I have had my same accountant with me over 20 years. I trust him with my finances. We meet together regularly. He handles not only my finances but also those of my kids, so that we can keep everything in sync. And he has done us very well. We pay our fair share of taxes, unlike some folks do.
Yeah.
And I have no problem with that, because I was told if you're not paying taxes, you're not making any money. So we pay our whatever we need to pay, but we also make sure that we're not overpaying. We make sure that we're buying things that we need that are appropriate. And the whole idea of doing financial planning, it really, really is important. Helps you guide where you're going to go and where you're going to make your next investment.
I remember when my first year of teaching, my dad said to me, "Hey, let me take a look at your paycheck." I think I was making $18,500. And he said, "Hey, see this thing here that says STRS on it?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You're going to be thankful someday." I'm like, "Come on, man. I'm 24 years old, and I'm never going to get old." Right? And so and he knew, because there had been some mistakes that he'd made along the way that he ultimately financially never totally recovered from, because he was just too old and too far into the game. And so when we have our high school, whether we have a separate pathway that's financially oriented, or whether all students are going to be required to take financial literacy at some level, and it's actually going to be a requirement in California in the future.
Well, I recall that, and I recall listening to a seminar when I was younger at that time and paid no attention to it whatsoever. I mean, to me, I was like you.
Yeah. Live forever.
Yeah, exactly. I'll worry about that later. Yeah. And later, came sooner than I thought.
Yeah.
But I was helpful that I was in the company of people that knew better than I did, and were able to give me some guidance and direction in that field. And so today, I don't have too many worries. It's just, although we always hope for no catastrophe to happen to our kids or something.
Sure.
But other than that, we've been pretty good. One little strategy that we employed, though, is that we had, for a period of time, I had envisioned myself a gentleman farmer, and we bought some farmland up in Northern California, and we were growing olives, and we produced some pretty high quality olive oil off that. But we hit a couple winters where it froze our crops and just killed the whole enterprise. So we ultimately sold the property, but I was advised, sell it, but hold back the note. Let them pay you. You be the person that holds the paper. And so now we get a nice income every month from the people that bought it, which supplements our income, and it far exceeds the price that we would have gotten had we just sold it outright.
And you help them, and they might not have qualified.
Exactly. Well, they couldn't.
In a more conventional way.
We sold it to some people that were working on our farm.
Yeah.
Because they grow produce for farmers markets and stuff. And it's been a very good relationship between the two of us. But it benefited us, and it was because I was advised from my people to, consider this. You'd be much better off in the long run.
Yeah. On this topic of innovation that you touched on a little bit earlier, what's the most innovative school facility project you've been involved with? You don't need to name it by name, but you can if you want to, because it strikes me that the education sector in general doesn't innovate terribly quickly. The technology kind of forces itself into our lives and into our buildings, but at the end of the day, I would guess that most structures are still fairly traditionally designed, with some exceptions. So, what's the most innovative project that you've been involved with where you said, "Oh my God, this blows my mind," or maybe there isn't one?
Most of the projects, as you described, are pretty typical. They're classroom buildings and they're modernized. Innovations Academy that we just finished building in
appropriately named, right?
Yeah, it's probably been the most. It was the initial building that we worked. It was a former pipe fitters building, a wood 2-story building that we really totally had to rebuild from the inside out to create learning spaces. And the head of the school, Christine Kuglin, and her staff really wanted something that was out of the ordinary and out of the norms. They didn't want traditional classrooms. They wanted smaller rooms. They wanted bigger rooms. And you face a lot of pushback from certain sectors that room had to be 960 square feet,
right.
Couldn't be any less or any bigger. And we did away with that, and we made them all kinds of different sizes because that's what they wanted. They wanted learning corridors. They wanted niches where the students can work out of. They didn't want traditional stuff. And so that school became a total off-the-records kind of school. It's just totally different than a lot of other schools. Yeah, it's in a square building, but it doesn't have a playground. It has nature walks and paths throughout the back area of the school. It's on a smaller site than normal. It's on in a neighborhood where you wouldn't even consider a school. It's in the middle of an industrial neighborhood. So it was really a different kind of school. And then you follow that up with Health Sciences High, who was in a building.
A bank, right?
In a bank. Well, it was in a bank building, but it was in there. They had owned the place for years. And we weren't really in favor of buying this building, but in the end of the day, it's going to be a tremendous opportunity to place a school in a non-traditional building, in the middle of a busy neighborhood, block away from the liquor store and all those things that you shouldn't have near schools, and security issues, but a totally different concept. And plus, Health Sciences High, in a hospital building that has fraught with all the issues of former hospitals we need to deal with. We'll wind up totally gutting this place and having a total new concept, and being able to place learning facilities in different areas and adjacent to the middle school on a hillside. A lot of challenges, but we have a wonderful set of architects who's up to the task. So I think, in terms of innovation, I think the whole San Diego Charter School effort has really been one of the most, for me, innovative types of experiences that I've come across. Because, like I said, largely most of the schools you see are just scraping by to get classrooms built and to get places to put their kids, let alone trying to feed them or trying to have athletic facilities or most charter schools don't have 50 acres or something that
right.
other schools have. So that's been the fun, it's been the challenge,
right.
and it's been the excitement in working with charter schools, because you have some incredible leaders that see things differently. And that's the exciting part for me, is to work with those people. But it all boils down to how much money you have.
Right. I always chuckle when I drive past big traditional district high schools.
70 acres.
I was driving by one in West Chula Vista recently.
Oh, yeah.
Like a double city block worth of field.
I went to a charter school in Texas. 70 acres and a football stadium.
And I think that just doing the math, schools are typically really inefficient in terms of using space. If you think about the typical school day, if you were to do a heat map of usage in classrooms, well, we know what happens in half of June, July, and half of August, right? But then you've got, what happens on weekends, and then you've got minimum days, and you've got days when seniors are gone at 1:30 in the afternoon. It's just an abundance of riches that isn't utilized. Yeah. You couldn't really run a private business with that same model.
No, you couldn't.
You never could.
And you couldn't staff them.
No.
The whole other thing is finding the staff to run a school that size.
Yeah.
There is a right size, for schools that are innovating. You can't have a tremendously huge facility, but you need a facility that's big enough. And what is that big enough? That's to be determined.
Right.
How can you offer these things? Programs.
Yeah, it's endlessly fascinating to kind of think about the different varieties and iterations. I have one more question for you to wrap up, but before that, I wanted to see if there's anything that we have not touched on that you would like to share, or that you were thinking about coming into today, or that might have popped up in your mind during today's conversation.
I think I'm always impressed with the level of desire and enthusiasm put forth by the staff that we work with. I'm a little bit intimidated sometimes by the technologies they use nowadays, because I'm kind of old school. I mean, I'm one of those guys that still takes notes, and instead of writing it out on my laptop and those kinds of things. But I think that the quality of educators we have is second to none. I mean, these people are absolutely dedicated folks, and it's really a pleasure working with them. And I mean, these are young folks that are their careers are still in the upward trend, and I think that they're going to do great things for kids. And so I think it's my parting shot with a lot of them is to at least try and get them into a facility where
right.
they can achieve.
Yeah, and that'll be important for the educators who do listen to this to hear and understand, because it's been a tough slog the last 3-4 years, especially in this profession, to know that there's hope. And I know I try to convey that in my work with our team, is that we're going to have a state-of-the-art high school. It's a Super Bowl type of opportunity to be able to design a building around the needs of a program. That most often doesn't happen. You normally slide into a building that was already there and you try to fit in. And so to have that opportunity, it's like building a custom home. Very few people get to build a custom home.
And I think that's important to note, is that people don't understand how complex it is to build a school, and how much it takes energy and time to get something off the drawing board into construction. Just the whole process of construction is not like building your house. It's much more complicated than that, and much more regulated. And they have to have patience to understand, and you need some good people behind that are doing it to get it done right.
Final thought. So Ray gets to design a billboard for the 5 freeway that people are going to look at for about 3 seconds as they drive by. If you could distill a career's worth of knowledge and experience and learning, it doesn't only have to be your educational career, but your side shiny object careers that you've had, what would that billboard say for the younger generation to give them hope? They got like 3 seconds to read it, so you got to keep it short. What would Ray's distilled knowledge and experience be?
I think it's really just do it. It just seems to ring true for everything, because if you think about it, just do it. Mm. And so many times that you think about, if I'd only done this, if I only did that. And a lot of times when I'm working on something and I think, man, I should do that, just go do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't put any doubt in yourself that you can't do it. You know, if it's something that's important to you, just do it.
Just go do it. Well, I think that's an appropriate place to wrap up. We'll have to have you back as our high school construction project moves along. It's been a real pleasure, Ray, and thank you again for your time this afternoon. I've really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here with you, and I'll definitely be around to wrap up some other time.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Superintendent's Hangout. You can follow me on Twitter at DVS1970. Please be sure to share this show with friends and family on social media and in the real world. Thank you to Brad Bacayal for editing and production assistance, and to Tina Royster for scheduling and logistics. Thanks for hanging out, and have a great day.